High School. Go Minutemen. I brought a couple of friends with me. Your Senator, Joe Donnelly, is here. Your Mayor, Tim Neese, is here. I wanted to congratulate everyone graduating tomorrow. I just met a couple of the valedictorians who seem like outstanding young ladies. My older daughter, Malia, graduates next week. So if there are any parents here, I hope you can give me some pointers on how not to cry too much at the ceremony and embarrass her. That's what I'm going to do. If you've got a chair, sit down. Relax. I got some stuff to say here. So I'm not going to talk about the fact that, my daughter leaving me is just breaking my heart. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the economy. I don't know that if you've noticed, but this is an election year. And it's a more colorful election season than most. It's been a little unusual. And no, I can't do that. The Constitution prohibits it, but more importantly, Michelle prohibits it. Now, one of the reasons we're told this has been an unusual election year is because people are anxious and uncertain about the economy. And our politics are a natural place to channel that frustration. So I wanted to come to the heartland, to the Midwest, back to close to my hometown, to talk about that anxiety, that economic anxiety, and what I think it means. And what I've got to say really boils down to 2 points, although I'm going to take a long time to make these 2 points. Number one, America's economy is not just better than it was 8 years ago. It is the strongest, most durable economy in the world. That's point number one. Point number two, we can make it even stronger and expand opportunity for even more people. But to do that, we have to be honest about what our real challenges are, and we've got to make some smart decisions going forward. Now, Elkhart is a good place to have this conversation because some of you remember this was the first city I visited as president. I'd been in office just 3 weeks when I came here. We were just a few months into what turned out to be the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes. Our businesses were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Our auto industry was about to go under. Our families were losing their savings and their health insurance, and as Kelly pointed out, they were in danger of losing their homes. And Elkhart was hit harder than most. Unemployment here would peak at 19.6%. That means nearly 1 in 5 people here were out of work. And I told you then that I was going to have your back. And we were going to work hard to bring this economy back. So what's happened since then? Unemployment in Elkhart has fallen to around 4%. At the peak of the crisis, nearly 1 in 10 homeowners in the state of Indiana were either behind on their mortgages or in foreclosure. Today, it's 1 in 30. Back then, only 75% of your kids graduated from high school. Tomorrow, 90% of them will. The auto industry just had its best year ever, and the RV capital of the world is doing its part. The industry is set to ship nearly 400,000 RVs this year, which will be an all-time record. So that's progress. And it's thanks to you, to the hard work you put in and the sacrifices you made for your families and the way that you looked out for each other. But we also wouldn't have come this far. Elkhart would not have come this far if we hadn't made a series of smart decisions. My administration, a cooperative Congress, decisions we made together early on in my administration. We decided to help the auto industry, to restructure. And we helped families refinance their homes. We decided to invest in job training so that folks who lost their jobs could retool. We decided to invest in things like high-tech manufacturing and clean energy and infrastructure so that entrepreneurs wouldn't just bring back the jobs that we had lost, but create new and better jobs. And folks who had lost work from the construction industry because the housing market had collapsed could go back to work rebuilding America. And we can see the results, not just here in Elkhart, but across the nation. By almost every economic measure, America's better off than when I came here at the beginning of my presidency. That's the truth. That's true. It's true. It's true. Over the past 6 years, our businesses have created more than 14 million new jobs. That's the longest stretch of consecutive private sector job growth in our history. We've seen the first sustained manufacturing growth since the 1990s. We cut unemployment in half, years before a lot of economists thought we could. We cut the oil that we buy from foreign countries by more than half, doubled the clean energy that we produce. For the first time ever, more than 90% of the country has health insurance. So, in fact, a poll that was out just last week says that 2 out of 3 Americans think their own family's financial situation is in pretty good shape. But we know a lot of people are still feeling stressed about their economic future. The pundits, they say one of the reasons the Republican Party has picked the candidate that it has, no booing, we're voting. We're not booing. But, if you watch the talking heads on TV, they'll say the reason that folks are angry is because nobody's paid enough attention to the plight of working Americans in communities like these. That's what they say. Now, look, I'm the first to admit my presidency hasn't fixed everything. We've had setbacks, we've had false starts. We've frankly been stuck with a Congress recently that's opposed pretty much everything that we tried to do. But I also know that I've spent every single day of my presidency focused on what I can do to grow the middle class and increase jobs and boost wages and make sure every kid in America gets the same kind of opportunities Michelle and I did. I know that. I know that communities like Elkhart haven't been forgotten in my White House. And the results prove that our focus has paid off. Elkhart proves it. Now, where we haven't finished the job, where folks have good reason to feel anxious, is addressing some of the longer-term trends in the economy that started long before I was elected, that make working families feel less secure. These are trends that have been happening for decades now, and that we've got to do more to reverse. Let me be clear about what those are. Despite the drop in unemployment, wages are still growing too slowly, and that makes it harder to pay for college or save for retirement. inequality is still too high. The gap between rich and poor is bigger now than it's been just about any time since the 1920s. The rise of global competition and automation of more and more jobs, the race of technology, all these trends have left many workers behind, and they've let a few at the top collect extraordinary wealth and influence like never before. And that kind of changes our politics. So all these trends make it easy for people to feel that somehow the system is rigged, and that the American dream is increasingly hard to reach for ordinary folks. And there are plenty of politicians that are preying on that frustration for headlines and for votes. Now, I am a politician for another 6 months or so. But I'm not running again. Yes. Besides, while I may have won the state of Indiana just barely in 2008, I know I lost the vote in Elkhart. I definitely got whooped here in 2012. I know I don't poll all that well in this county. So I'm not here looking for votes. I am here because I care deeply as a citizen about making sure we sustain and build on all the work that communities like yours have done to bring America back over these last 7.5 years. And I came here precisely because this county votes Republican. That's one of the reasons I came here. Because if the economy is really what's driving this election, then it's going to be voters like you that have to decide between two very different visions of what's going to help strengthen our middle class. You're going to have to make that decision. So let me be as straight as I can be about the choice of economic policies that you are going to face. And I'm going to start with the story that not every Republican, but most Republican candidates up and down the ticket are telling. And it goes something like this. And I think this is pretty fair, and if you don't, then you can look it up. So their basic story is America's working class, America's middle class, families like yours, have been victimized by a big, bloated federal government run by a bunch of left-wing elitists like me. And the government's taking your hard-earned tax dollars, and it's giving them to freeloaders and welfare cheats, and we're strangling business with endless regulations, and this federal government is letting immigrants and foreigners steal whatever jobs Obamacare hasn't killed yet. Look, I'm being serious here. I mean, that's the story that's been told. And I haven't, turned on Fox News or listened to conservative talk radio yet today, but I've turned them on enough over these past 7.5 years to know I'm not exaggerating in terms of their story. That's the story they tell. You can hear it from just about every member of Congress on the other side of the aisle. And instead of telling you what they're for, they've defined their economic agenda by what they're against, and that's mainly being against me. And their basic message is anti-government, anti-immigrant, anti-trade, and let's face it, it's anti-change. And look, a lot of people believe it. And if what they were saying were true, I suppose it would make sense to run on a platform of just rolling back everything we've done over these past 7.5 years, and happy days would be here again. If what they were saying was true, then just being against whatever it is that we've done might make sense. But what they're saying isn't true. And if we're going to fix what's really wrong with the economy, we've got to understand that. So let me just do some quick myth busting. And I'm going to start with the biggest myth. which is that the federal government keeps growing and growing and growing and wasting your money and giving your tax dollars to people who don't deserve it. Now here's the truth. You can look it up. These journalists here, they can do some fact checking. As a share of the economy, we spend less on domestic priorities outside of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We spend less than we did when Ronald Reagan was president. When President Reagan or George W. Bush held this job, our deficits got bigger. When Bill Clinton and I have held this job, deficits have gotten smaller. Our deficits have not grown these past 7.5 years. We've actually cut the deficit by almost 75%. Moreover, there are fewer families on welfare than in the 1990s. Funding has been frozen for 2 decades. There's not a whole bunch of giveaways going on right now. Aside from our obligation to care for the elderly and Americans with disabilities, the vast majority of people who get help from the federal government are families of all backgrounds who are working, striving to get back on their feet, striving to get back into the middle class, and sometimes, yes, their kids need temporary help from food stamps when mom and dad are between jobs. But look, these kids didn't cause the financial crisis. These kids aren't spending us into bankruptcy. They're not what's holding back the middle class. And by the way, neither is Obamacare. Let's look at the numbers. Again, I'm just giving facts here. I will have some opinions later, but right now I'm just giving facts. I signed the Affordable Care Act into law over 6 years ago. Since then, our businesses have created jobs every single month. We did this while covering 20 million Americans who didn't have health insurance, ending discrimination against pre-existing conditions for everybody, including those who had health insurance, dramatically slowing the rate at which healthcare costs were going up. In the decade before Obamacare, employer-based premiums grew by an average of 8% a year. That meant you were paying that much more every year for health insurance. Last year, they grew by 4%, half as fast as they were growing. That doesn't mean you're happy about the 4%, but it wasn't 8%. Today, the average family's health insurance premium is $2,600 less than it would have been if premiums had kept on going up at the pace before Obamacare. And by the way, just for folks here in Indiana, last year most Hoosiers who shopped around for Obamacare on healthcare.gov found plans that cost $75 a month or less. For the millions of Americans who buy on healthcare.gov, they get tax credits to help them pay for it. The average price increase this year has been $4 a month. It hasn't been a double-digit percentage hike, $4 a month. But my bigger point is to bust this myth of crazy, liberal government spending. Government spending is not what is squeezing the middle class. Myth number 2 is the notion that my administration has killed jobs through over-regulation. Back in the 60s and the 70s, government was adding all kinds of regulations. Rules protecting workers' rights, rules protecting the environment. And these regulations to improve public health and safety, they didn't crush the economic growth that took place back in the 60s and the 70s, and they're not crushing economic growth now. I've issued fewer regulations than my predecessor. I've issued fewer executive orders than any 2-term president since Ulysses S. Grant. That's a long time ago. The regulations that we have issued, rules to protect our air, and our water. Rules to keep families from getting cheated when buying a house or investing their savings. Those rules have benefited our economy a lot more than they've cost. They've helped families. They've helped the middle class. They haven't hurt them. Here's myth number 3. Other countries are killing us on trade. Now, it is true that a lot of supporters of trade deals in the past sometimes oversold all the good that it was going to do for the economy. The truth is the benefits of trade are usually widely spread. It's one of the reasons why you can buy that big flat screen TV for a couple $100. Why the cost of a lot of basic necessities have gone down. Some parts of the economy, like the agricultural sector or the tech sector, have really done well with trade. Some sectors and communities have been hurt by foreign competition. And what's also true is sometimes the pain of a plant closing here in America is magnified when you know that other countries are cheating. They're keeping American goods out of their markets. They're unfairly subsidizing their businesses to undercut our businesses. A lot of the worst violators, they don't even have trade deals with us at all. So here's what we've done. Over the past 7 years, we've brought more trade cases against other countries for cheating than anybody else. Every case that's been decided, America has won. That's what we've done. Making sure that we got a level playing field. But the truth is, trade has helped our country a lot more than it's hurt us. Exports help lead us out of the recession. Companies that export pay workers higher wages than folks who don't export. And anybody who says that somehow shutting ourselves off from trade is going to bring jobs back, they're just not telling the truth. In fact, most of the manufacturing jobs that we lost over the past decade, they weren't the result of trade deals. They were the result of technology and automation that lets businesses make more stuff with fewer workers. If you go into an auto plant these days, used to need several thousand workers. Now they need 1,000 workers to produce the same number of cars. Just because they're robots and they're machines that have replaced a lot of the work. That's true in offices too, by the way. Think about bank tellers last time you dealt with one of those, because now you got ATM machines. So we can't put technology back in a box any more than we can cut ourselves off from the global supply chain. All the RVs that are manufactured right here, I guarantee you some of those parts came from someplace else. And then we sell them back to other places, other parts of the world. And no matter how many tariffs we're threatening to slap on other countries' goods, no matter how many trade wars we start saying we're gonna put in place, that's not gonna help middle-class families here. In fact, independent economists say a trade war would trigger another recession and cost millions of jobs. So when you hear somebody threatening to cut off trade and saying that that's standing up for American workers, that's just not true. Here's the 4th myth, that immigrants are taking all of our jobs. Now let's look at the numbers. Right now, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is near its lowest level in 40 years. It's near its lowest level in 40 years. It's lower than than it was before I came into office. It's lower than during Ronald Reagan's time. It's true that new immigrants sometimes compete for service and construction jobs, but they also start about 30% of all new businesses in America. Everybody thinks that immigrants come here and then they're getting all this stuff from the government. Immigrants pay a lot more in taxes than they receive in services. But most importantly, immigrants are not the main reason wages haven't gone up for middle-class families. Those decisions are made in the boardrooms of companies where top CEOs are getting paid more than 300 times the income of the average worker. So, deporting 11 million immigrants, not only is that a fantasy that would cost taxpayers billions of dollars and tear families apart and just logistically would be impossible. Even if it were possible, it wouldn't do anything to seriously help the middle class. So now what would help is if we fixed our immigration system the way I proposed, so that everybody plays by the rules, so that we got strong border security. But we also are making sure that families who've been here like 10 years, 20 years, that they're out of the shadows, they're paying taxes, they're going through a background check. That would grow our economy faster. That would shrink our deficits further. We just need a Congress that's willing to make it happen. We need a Congress that's willing to make it happen. So, look, here's my main point. The primary story that Republicans have been telling about the economy is not supported by the facts. It's just not. They repeat it a lot, but it's not supported by the facts. But they say it anyway. Now, why is that? It's because it has worked to get them votes, at least at the congressional level. Because, and here, look, I'm just being blunt with you. By telling hardworking middle-class families that the reason they're getting squeezed is because of some moochers at the bottom of the income ladder, because of minorities, or because of immigrants, or because of public employees, or because of feminists, or because poor folks who aren't willing to work, they've been able to promote policies that protect powerful special interests and those who are at the very top of the economic pyramid. That's just the truth. I hope you don't mind me being blunt about this, but I've been listening to this stuff for a while now. And I'm concerned when I watch the direction of our politics. I mean, we have been hearing this story for decades. Tales about welfare queens, talking about takers, talking about the 47%. It's the story that is broadcast every day on some cable news stations, on right-wing radio. It's pumped into cars and bars and VFW halls all across America and right here in Elkhart. And if you're hearing that story all the time, you start believing it. It's no wonder people think big government is the problem. No wonder public support for unions is so low. No wonder that people think that the deficit's gone up under my presidency when it's actually gone down. No wonder that they did a survey, a lot of white Americans think reverse discrimination is as big a problem as discrimination against minorities, even though black unemployment is twice as high as white unemployment. Oh. And the typical Hispanic woman makes 55 cents for every dollar a white man earns. And there are only a handful of women running Fortune 500 companies. But that's the story that's been told. And I'm here to say, Elkhart, 7.5 years since I first came here, we've got to challenge the assumptions behind this economic story. And the reason is it has ended up dividing Americans who actually have common economic interests and should be working together for a better deal from the people who serve them. And it's made people cynical about government. And it's kept working families from pushing our political system to actually address our economic challenges in a realistic way. Families of all races and all backgrounds deserve higher wages. Families of all races and all backgrounds deserve quality health care and decent retirement savings. Every child in this country deserves an education that lets them dream bigger than the circumstances in which they're born. In today's economy, we can't put up walls around America. We're not going to round up 11 million people. We're not going to put technology back in the box. We're not going to rip away hard-earned rights of women and minorities, Americans with disabilities, so that they're able to more fairly and fully participate in the workplace. These are permanent fixtures in our economy. And rolling them back will not help folks in Elkhart or any place else. And if we're going to transform our politics so that they're actually responsive to working families and are actually growing the middle class, then we've got to stop pitting working Americans against each other. We're going to have to come together and choose a vision of America where everybody gets a fair shot and everybody does their fair share and everybody plays by the same set of rules. And that's the vision that made progress possible over these last 7 years. And that's what's going to lead us forward now. Now, this isn't a State of the Union address. I already gave my last one. But in the time remaining, I do want to offer some suggestions that I think would actually help give everybody who works hard a fair shot at opportunity and security in today's economy. Yeah, and you've heard some of these things before, but it's worth repeating because they're true. Number one, let's get wages rising faster. Now, here's the good news. Wages are actually growing at a rate of about 3% so far this year. That's the good news. Working Americans are finally getting a little bigger piece of the pie. But we've got to accelerate that. That's why, for example, my administration recently took new action to help millions of workers finally collect the overtime pay that they have earned. That's going to help. But we should also raise the minimum wage high enough so that if somebody's working full time, they're not living in poverty. Some states, some cities have done it, but we need a national law. We should make sure women get equal pay for equal work. That's something we should all agree on. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. Republicans got daughters too. They shouldn't want them to get paid less than somebody's boy for doing the same job. If you care about working families getting a bigger paycheck, then that's a clear choice for you right there. We also need to give workers a bigger voice in the economy. Now, one of the reasons that wages have not grown faster over the last couple of decades is because some politicians, some businesses, some laws have undermined the ability of workers to bargain for a better deal. And that needs to change. You know, we always talk about folks talking about the good old days. But let me tell you something, in the good old days, 50 years ago, more than 1 in 4 American workers belonged to a union. 1 in 4. The reason all those manufacturing jobs that everybody wants to get back, the reason they paid well was because folks were unionized in those plants. And they not only negotiated for good wages, but also good benefits. And they had a pension plan that they could count on. So it used to be 1 in 4 were members of unions. Today it's about 1 in 10. And it's not a coincidence.
All right, folks, we are taking